What happens when a blind man, a woman of color, and a child of immigrants get together to discuss how diversity, inclusion, and equity affect your business?
Hi everybody, welcome to the Choose Inclusion podcast. I'm UB and I am the Latino white guy of the group.
I'm Nina. I am the woman of color in the group.
And I'm Mike. I'm the blind guy. All right, welcome back everybody to the Choose Inclusion podcast. Today I am super excited. This is Mike Hess, by the way. I am super excited to introduce Miss Christie Buchele, comedian, and also fellow member of the People with Disabilities community. Christy,
yes.
welcome.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it so much.
Can you tell us a joke?
I'm
just
no.
kidding.
No. Come to a show.
Like, no.
I would,
PG-13.
Go to a show.
Yeah,
Yes.
go to a show. That happens all the time. People ask for you to tell a joke, and then it's like not in the right theater, if you will.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, yeah, I see how that could be funny. And you're like, okay. And
Do
then
you get
like,
that at family gatherings?
and you
a
like,
lot?
yes. And then you lose like confidence in that joke that if you did try to tell them that joke, because they're like, oh yeah. And you're like, oh man, I'm never telling that joke again. God.
Well, that's kind of a nice segue into part of what we wanted to talk about today, which kind of revolves around this center of attention idea, right? So on the one hand, as a comedian, you're up on stage and you are absolutely the center of attention in that moment.
Yeah.
But on the other end, where as a member of the community of people with disabilities, you also garner that similar attention,
Sure.
but maybe for, I don't know, maybe for the wrong reasons. Like how
Yeah.
do you view that difference?
Well, that's why I think stand-up is so interesting personally. And most people who do stand-up have some sort of thing. They may not have a physical disability like me. I have a very mild cerebral palsy, but you can see it when I'm walking and whatnot. And but people who do stand-up really usually have a story to tell, and they like the idea of being able to control how they tell it.
Sure.
So stand-up or comedy provides them this opportunity to let people know about this thing that, you know, maybe makes them a minority or makes them other or different in a way that they choose. And that's what makes stand-up and a lot of little weirdos be attracted to stand-up because they can control the dialogue around whatever their thing is that makes them other or different for sure. Yeah.
Oh, that's a really fascinating point.
Yeah.
One of the so obviously this podcast is really focused on helping the Fortune 10,000, just organizations in general, be willing to have the conversation in and around inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. So being a fellow member of the People with Disabilities community, I'd love to know your philosophy. Because organizations reach out to me all the time. They're attempting to figure out how to get more people to opt in or disclose their disability. Yeah. So I'd love to get your philosophy on, when you feel like it's appropriate, how you do it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, man, I am really trying to figure that out as just a human being for sure. I think that, I am such an open book as far as like how my stand-up works and stuff. So disclosing is not a big deal. Also, I have it's a disability that you can see. So it's like, I don't really have a choice whether I want to disclose it or not. People will ask what is that? What is it? And sometimes, usually not at work, they won't, but I really struggle with it because I grew up in a environment where it was like, you're just like everybody else, you're just like everyone else. But now that I am getting older and I do need to advocate for myself and I need to maybe ask for some modifications or accommodations at work or whatever, I actually don't have the language for it because I grew up with you're not different, and there was no training. So now I really am I'm really figuring that out. And I think one of the most interesting places for disclosure is actually not in the workforce, but it does come over to the workforce is actually through this like online dating. Online dating is like the most fascinating thing to me. That has been my number one like question recently, is just like, when do I tell people? Like, because that's the one place where they can't see it. Like, they can't see it if I don't tell them. And so I'm always like, when do I tell them? I'm like, I have a joke right now I'm working on where I'm just like, do I wait until the date? Like, do I just show up really early and sit down and be sitting already so they don't see it? Like, that's the hardest part. So I think that as far as in the workforce, the number one thing, and that's why, like, I used to have another podcast called Empty Girlfriend, where people would talk about their relationships, and we would get into some really like personal things. And the number one policy for me and my co-host, was to always be just really sharing of ourselves. And then that made it so that the guest always felt comfortable to share as much as they wanted to. And so I think that is the policy I carry into my work and into my workplace, is that if I'm sharing, that helps people just want to disclose and open up about their own stuff. But if you're not leading that, like showing by the example or putting that model out for people to see, they're not going to follow it. So if you're like in that company and you're like, how do we get people to open up or disclose their disabilities more? Well, then you need to start sharing your own stuff, is what my personal
that's like
opinion
great
is.
advice for leaders.
Yeah.
Like, every leader of every company should be framing how they think about communication with their entire team that way, right?
Yep.
Like, if they want their employees to feel comfortable and valued, then they need to be open and talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, and it is a vulnerability piece that people don't always love to share, but I mean, I think it's just so important. I mean, that's why I also teach stand-up here in Denver, and that's a big piece of it. A lot of those are CEOs coming to my class, just wanting to get better public speaking skills and stuff. And that vulnerability piece is like, I hit it so hard for them. Like, that's the number one thing. And CEOs are not vulnerable people usually. They're like, they are, try to seem so strong. So to share that, like, maybe you have a struggle, or maybe you have ADD or something like that, is like so counterintuitive to what they're used to, or the image that they're trying to portray to people.
So these CEOs are taking comedy classes?
Yes, I have like CEOs taking comedy classes, and I mean, any walk of life really takes my classes, but I'm always surprised when it is a CEO.
Okay,
in my class.
so can we like how you can vote people off the island? Can we vote people onto your island? I got some CEOs that really,
yes.
right? I'm just saying, right? Like,
no,
yes.
they could come. I mean, I would love it.
Yeah,
they can always.
It needs to be a thing, because I know some CEOs that truly need to learn how to tell a joke. I'm just saying. Like, I'm just saying.
Gosh,
yeah.
or just use a microphone, or host an event.
So is comedy about vulnerability then?
Oh, my favorite comedy is if you are watching, there's a lot of comics who you don't know anything about them when you get off stage. That's not the kind of comedy I like, but that's definitely the new like wave of American comedy for sure. So has anyone heard about Gad, the like French Jerry Seinfeld?
No.
No. They did a really good story of him on This American Life, I believe it was, but he also has a show on Netflix now. But he is like the Jerry Seinfeld of France, right? But France is like back in the 70s as far as where they're at with their sense of humor and their stand-up comedy, okay? So he came to America recently because he wants to become just as big in America as he is in France. Like, to him, stand-up comedy is one of the uniquely American arts, and he's like, you haven't made it unless you've made it in the United States. Well, he comes here, and all of his stuff is very like, France is like this, and America is like this, and women are like this, and men are like this, and it's very like kind of just old school. But a lot of comics listen to him, listen to his set, and their number one thing was like, be vulnerable. like to share. I want to hear like what this is like. Why are you driven to come here when you are a millionaire? You don't need this. You're coming here to like bomb basically. And like why? Like what in your psyche is pushing you to? That's the stuff I want to hear about, you know. And but he's very like it's very guarded, and it's just like. That's where they're at with their sense of humor.
And it's not synonymous. I'm sorry, UB. So when you think of like CEOs and how like I never like an adjective for a CEO is not vulnerable.
No.
Oh, absolutely.
Just saying, right? Like
that's exactly
never.
Right.
Yeah.
But in these, you know, as a part of these diversity and inclusion discussions, you know, and we've talked about this on other shows. It's the communication piece. And it has to start at that leadership level, like that, and so that vulnerability is huge. You look at Hannah Gatsby.
Yes.
To me, she's the extreme of where, you know, where I think, you know, she was, the way I understood her to say is that her early stuff was self-deprecating, right? Like it's you're getting up there and you're being vulnerable, but you're really putting yourself down to get the laugh.
Yeah.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, she had to stop because she couldn't.
Yeah.
Continue to do that to herself. Like she just felt horrible doing that. And so it seems like there's a balance there, right? Like how do you tell that?
Well,
how do you tell your story? And then
there's a certain formula to comedy. So part of me is like, okay, Hannah, Banks, you shouldn't do stand up anymore. That's my opinion. Because if you internalize your self-deprecating humor, that's your own psychological things you should go to therapy for. But anyway, sorry, I can't really. But
the opinions expressed by
therapy with Christie Buchele.
But yeah, no, I mean, I spend my entire the very first class in my class is just all about gaining whether the feedback that you get from the audience when you're on stage is just information. So if they don't like it, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to like yourself. And it's all about disconnecting that piece from because you're gonna bomb. You're always gonna bomb. You're gonna bomb in business if you're trying and you're putting stuff out there. You're gonna bomb sometimes, probably 80% of the time.
I so needed to hear this today.
Yeah,
Thank you, Christy.
there's a rule of 9 that for every 9 things you put out into the world, only one of them is good. But you have to put the 9 out in order to get to the one good thing.
Oh, gosh,
but
I wish
if
all businesses would internalize that.
Yeah.
Mine's
concept.
9.99.
Yeah.
I mean, I think with all the pressure from boards of directors and from investors and from stakeholders, there's always this pressure that you have to be perfect before you put anything out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you just put anything out there, and make a mistake, it just creates.
You feel like it undermines you and your authority or whatever it is, and it's just not. I mean, it just depends on what you value. For things to come back not the way you want, isn't it? I mean, you can call it a failure. I literally just say that's information. So now I want to do it differently this next time. Or if it works, you're like, great, I want to do that. How do we make it even better? It's always going to be information, and it's not. Then you don't have to then take it and internalize it with yourself. And because there's faulty assumption where people are like, oh, if people don't like my jokes, then they're not going to like me, and then I'm not allowed to like myself, and then I'm going to die. And it gets really serious really fast. But you have to just turn that off. A joke or a business idea is not you as a person. So, I mean, it's... and the fact that you're just putting stuff out there, I'm always so really giving people praise at that point, because I think that's the scary part. The scary part is putting the ideas out into the world and and making them vulnerable to feedback, and that's the scariest part. And so that's the part that deserves praise, whether or not it works or not. That's another thing. You need to be open to making changes at that point. If you're not, that's also where a problem in the vulnerability comes in. If you're not open to feedback and changing your ideas or admitting when it's not working. But if you've separated yourself from, putting a value judgment on yourself, whether something works or not, when feedback comes back that you need to change it, that would be so much easier for everyone because it's not like they have already detached from whether or not something's working being a judgment of themselves, you know. So
aside from coming to you, right, to learn, like how can people start to become more vulnerable and open to telling their story, particularly, you know, people who have disabilities, whether you can see them or not, who want to let their boss know or their team know? What are some ways that they can start to get there, right? Like, what are exercises, I don't know, you know, things that people can start to practice?
Absolutely. Well, I think go on to online dating. Do that. No,
even if you're married?
No, that's really, I really did start, kind of. No, but I really did start using those to, like, because the idea of telling, I have only dated people who have seen my stand-up in the last, since I've started stand-up 10 years, I've only mostly dated comics because they've seen my stand-up and I don't have to get over that hump of like telling them I have a disability. They already know, right? So it's like pigeonholing me into these like relationships, but I did really like, but I'm terrified. I'm trying to write about this on stage, but I really am terrified that like by telling somebody I have a disability, like they'll immediately just be like, oh, I don't want that. Like, because in my mind, a lot of times I'm like, why would anybody want to like deal with that? Dating's hard enough. Why would you like want to date somebody with a disability, especially in Colorado when everybody's like wanting to climb a 14er every other day? It's like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, and they put like which ski pass they have on their,
exactly. And you're like, oh, that's not for
You're on
me.
Icon? Oh, I'm Epic.
Yeah, we can
Nina,
never be.
how would you know that?
Yes.
That's a great question.
No, but the exercises, I mean, just writing in general is going to be a great exercise. You don't have to share it with people, but writing in general is always going to be helpful. But really opening yourself up to listening to other people's stories. So whether it's not you actually are going to storytelling, like listening events, or like going to singles mixers or adult mixers or whatever, where you like actually have to talk to people outside of your bubble, like God forbid. These are the things that people need to like practice, right? They need to get offline and they need to like be able to talk to people in person. And I think strangers are like the best practice for just like practicing telling them these things, and because you're like, oh, I'm never see you again. I mean, talk to the person at the grocery store who's like scanning your groceries and
Uber drivers,
you know, Uber drivers is great. Like because like that's just good practice, and they have no bearing on your life. So
I always tip because I'm like, you know what? I just bared my soul to them, and I'm never going to see them again. There's $5. Bam.
Yes, you need it. They need it.
It's therapeutic. It's therapy.
Yeah, it
Don't
is.
treat your Uber drivers like your personal therapist.
I usually they give me a 1 because they're like, I don't want that dude in my car again.
Right.
Like, I just
I think that's just it. I mean, I think that the power of listening to other people's stories and then practicing sharing your own in more of an artistic way before it's at your company and talking to HR is always a great practice. So if you get those opportunities to share things and get those opportunities to just like speak publicly and open about it, even if it's with a stranger, I think is always just good practice. And I think we all need to talk to each other more and stop.
So, Christy, I want to take one of your classes, first of all. Like, after hearing about it here, I'm like, this sounds great.
Yeah.
But I'm sure our listeners also want to know, how do they get in touch with you to find out more about these classes or... Yeah.
You can go to voodoocomedy.com. It's through Voodoo Comedy Playhouse that I do it. So there's usually a wait list, but they're always coming out with another round of classes.
There's
There is. I'm sorry.
So
I only have 12 students a class, so they cap out just because I can only.
There's
get
no
feedback.
pool. We can't get any pool. Like really?
Yeah, I can. Well, yeah, you guys, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, this is for our audience.
I don't get paid.
Michael.
I don't get paid. I do get messages like people like get me into your class, and it's like
Really?
Weird. Yeah. Like,
I want to know more
We
about
should
these
totally-
CEOs.
We
Like,
should
know.
totally go. All three
Yeah.
of us should go do a class together. What do you guys think?
I'm in.
Yeah,
I think
let's
you
do it.
should.
Absolutely.
I think everybody should.
We'll
do
record it.
so.
We'll record snippets for the podcast.
I think that'd be
think
fantastic.
that's
Expose all of
great.
our vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
Well,
I mean-
let's not say all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Inject some humor into it.
Yeah. So, but those are all the things. And if you were wondering, there's like 5 umbrellas you can write under with stand up, but I think that'll open up your
Yeah.
vulnerability. So it's like relationships, whatever,
Easy.
romantic or whatever,
Yep.
childhood, day job, special challenges, which are like anything permanent. So my disability, your LGBTQ stuff, your race, things like that, your gender, those things. And then there's current issues, which is like if you just got fired, if you just had a baby, if you just got married, like something that's like a big life event, but it's just sort of like for now and like not gonna have a bearing on your day to day, like all forever and always and stuff. So those are the 5 things, and I just tell my students to write under one, like free write under those one of those umbrellas, you know, every day to just sort of see what comes up and what comes out. And if you go and start writing, and I tell them not to worry about being funny, obviously. Anybody who's trying to practice, they're not worried about being funny at all. But
I would be.
but like just free write, like not without a goal of like even making sense. You know, you see what comes up and you see what's really like bothering you and what's under your skin a little bit. It's amazing what kind of comes up. But that's a great exercise and a good practice for just kind of sharing. You know.
Well, Christy, I'm personally super excited to have you as an MC at our 5th annual Dining in the Dark event on February 8th.
2 days from now. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
I'm
Yes,
really
I'm so
excited.
excited.
So thank you so much for
No problem.
really your willingness to come. You know, obviously our organization is all about helping people with disabilities find employment opportunities out there.
Yeah.
And I think your wisdom in this podcast is completely apropos, and just we get it all the time. I get asked all the time from not only large organizations, how to get more people to opt in to choose, to disclose, but also people from the disability community all the time. I'm a big, obviously, big red truck, all right? I've got a cane. It's real obvious to tell, very similar that I have a disability as well. Mm-hmm. However, I coach people all the time, like the, embrace, like I am who I am today because of my blindness. Like I'm able to change the world because of the challenges that I've had to overcome. And if people are judging you based on the beautiful person that you are because of your CP, then F them. Like that's all I got to say, because you're an amazing human being, Christy, and I'm so honored to have you at the Dining in the Dark. So thank you.
Thank you so
and
much.
Thank you for joining the podcast too.
Yeah,
and I'm hoping a lot of people sign up for your. I know they have a long wait list, and
Yeah,
it's clearly
I
just
don't
going to
know
get
how
longer with all the audience all signing up for it.
Yeah.
But
Well, maybe there's a way that the Inclusion Lab can help with that.
I would love,
so let's
I would
discuss.
love to do that. I take my class anywhere in all places.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. What else? Did I have anything else?
yeah,
Did we
what's
cover
your
everything?
Twitter handle?
Oh,
That's where you tell your jokes, right?
Yeah. Twitter and Instagram are Kabuchsy, Kabuchsy. So that's where I put my schedule for my jokes, and I post dumb dating app things and little quippy things, and so
Just
that's where
saying,
they can find
Christy,
me.
have you ever dated a blind person?
I have not.
Because I mean, we wouldn't be able to see like any kind of CP kind of things, right? I'm just saying.
Mike, you're married.
I mean, we have
I'm not talking about
literally.
me.
I
I know a bunch of single blind dudes. I'm just saying. I've been married 25 years. No, okay. All right. Disclaimer. Okay. I didn't say me, but would you? All right. I'll
And
stop
done.
there.
Thank you, Christy.
Yes.
It's been amazing.
Thank
Yeah, if tickets are still available for Dining in the Dark, right, Mike?
Barely.
Barely. So Saturday, it's coming up. So 2 days from now. So come and experience that. And thank you all very much. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Choose Inclusion podcast. Special thanks to our producer, Spencer Daniel, and VP Legacies, which helps increase your employee and customer retention, utilizing strategic communication strategies. Find out more at vplegacies.com. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And you can see closed captioning for this podcast on our YouTube channel. We'll be publishing a new episode on the first Thursday of every month. You can find us online on our website, chooseinclusion.com, and contact us on Twitter at chooseinclusion.